In today's episode, we are speaking with Loran Swensen, founder of the company Solex and innovator behind the revolutionary AO scan technology, which we're going to be talking about today. So I came across the AO scan shortly after Tay and I got the quantum energy wellness bed that we got from Ralph Sudeth. And then I came across the AO scan, and I was absolutely amazed by the depth and the wealth of information that we were able to get from literally my tablet connected into this software. And, I was talking to Tay and I said, to get this kind of information, if I were to run blood tests and urine tests and everything, I'm talking like thousands and thousands of dollars worth of testing that are information that I have access to within, like a 5 or 6 minute scan for the longest scan. And then not only just information that I can analyze and I can look at, but also the technology is built in to be able to create the optimal frequencies to try and harmonize that. So, it wasn't too long before that, Lauren, that I was talking to Tay and I was like, I feel like we're gradually going to move away from blood tests and all of these sort of more invasive measurements. And, I want to find Star Trek medicine, like the camcorder where you're checking people and you can just pick up on what's going on. And, I don't think we're too far off there. And your AO scan has probably been the closest thing I've come to Star Trek technology.
Lauren's going to say, in fact, that's the one coming down the pipeline.
Right. So anyways, Loran, welcome to the show. And so we shortly after that experience with the AO scan, we got a hold of Loran and asked him to come on and do an interview with us so we can share this information with all of you guys, because that's what we do on the Inspire Health podcast. We talk to visionaries and game changers that are moving the needle forward. So Loran, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. And it's truly an honor to be able to be part of this podcast with you. It's so much fun to be able to share our experiences and to learn or to share what we've learned with others. And that's what this is. And so thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So I read your backstory and was kind of learning a little bit more about you when I first came across the AO scan, but I'd love for you to share your background on how you came across this technology and not only just coming across it, but then how you started to work with it and even make advancements from where it started to where we are now. So let me pass it back over to you to share that with us.
Okay, that's a great question. And it's one that deserves an explanation. We've been manufacturing medical or health-related devices since 1987 or 8. And we, in 2008, we were at a medical convention in Guangzhou, China. And it was a huge convention. It took 3 days to get through the convention. So it's not a little tiny convention. And there were exhibitors literally from all over the world. And one that caught our attention was one from Russia. And it was a big booth. It was probably 50 feet square. And there were probably 6 or 7 tables set up with a computer on it and a technician at each one. And every single table had a line of people waiting to get up there. And they had this big picture on the back, it was more like a billboard, of an astronaut or a cosmonaut floating in space attached to the International Space Station. And of course, it was all in Russian and Chinese. And so our interpreter was trying to explain to us it's some type of energy medicine device. Well, that piqued our interest. And so we got in line, and 20, 30 minutes later, it was our turn to sit down at the table. It was my wife and I and our interpreter. Now, it's interesting. So it was a Russian technician, and then we had a Chinese interpreter. Oh, there was a Russian interpreter to Chinese, and then we had a Chinese interpreter to English. And so we're sitting there. And so I don't know how much got lost in translation, but it was fun to do this. And so my wife was the first one to sit down, and they put these big transducers on her head, about the size of poker cards, attached to her head. And she was just supposed to sit there and be quiet. And over a period of about 5 or 6 or 8 minutes, they did this quick scan on her. And it came up and it indicated that she had some issues with her reproductive system and with her circulation, with her heart, conditions that we knew she had, but nothing that's apparent. You would look at it and not say, oh, you have this, this, and this. So that piqued our interest. And then it was my turn to sit down, and the same thing, came up with issues that I knew that I was dealing with, but no way anybody would know. And then they showed us how not only could it identify these things, it could also help balance them back out to fix them by putting in frequencies back into the body through the transducers. And they were explaining to us this is how the Russian space program worked, how they monitored the health of the cosmonauts who were at the space station, because they're up there for months on end. You can't just go in when you get a sore throat and go see a doctor. And so we spent probably our allotted time at the table, probably 30 minutes with them between the two of us. And then when the show was over, we met with these people and we continued dialogue with them for about 2 months. The technology was absolutely amazing. What was really exciting for us is both of us felt, even with just that one session, that we had some type of a change or relief in the conditions that we were dealing with. So we had that tangible experience that this is more than just voodoo. There was something really happening. Anyway, over a period of a few months, we secured the rights to bring that technology to the US. And the technology had originally been designed by 3 Russian physicists, brilliant people that were working for the Russian government from 1989 through about 2000, 2001. At the end of that period of time, these 3 physicists all got into a discussion on who was the most important person in the software. And it was unfortunate it happened. And I guess that happens a lot. And they all went their own ways. And not one of them lives in Russia anymore. One lives in Bolivia, one lives in New York, and one lives in Ukraine. Anyway, we ended up licensing the technology from the guy that was in Ukraine in 2008. The reason I'm telling you this is each one of these 3 people, they were equally important in the development of that software. They all brought a very special set of expertise to the development. So when they went their different ways, they all went out with their own version of this software. But each one was lacking 2 parts, or at least wasn't 100% of what the other 2 parts should have been. Well, remember, this software had been developed originally in 89 and 90. It was still the same software in 2008. Now, 5 years in the computer industry, that's like 50 years in the car industry. They're not even antiques anymore. That's like ox and cart technology back then. And so in 2010, now we've been selling the software here in the US for about 2 years. And when Windows 10 came out, the software really had issues. It would freeze up on you. You'd be halfway through a 2-hour scan and you'd have to start over because it froze. And some of the things, you could tell which software, because we owned all 3 softwares. You could tell which software, which program was better in certain areas. Well, we started having so many problems, and the people that had bought the equipment from us, and the equipment was if you bought all the attachments, it was $38,000. So this was not a cheap investment for people. And so people that had bought it and their system starts freezing up, they're upset. They're going, hey, how do I get my system to work? So we're dealing with our gentleman, Ivan, in Ukraine, and he says, Lauren, I hate to tell you this, but you know about as much about this software as any of us do, and there's nothing more we can do other than try to help you get through your freezes. And so our arrangement of their licensing ended at that point, and we literally rewrote the program from the ground up in 2011. 2012 is when we started, and we still use their algorithms for the database on, this frequency equates to this cell or to this tissue or to this organ. But everything else we rewrote from the ground up with today's hardware and today's software. And we hired engineers that understood that type of algorithms. And in 2016 is when we launched our first 100%, the AO scan head was developed right here by us. We would never have what we have today without those 3 pioneers that started in 89 and 90. They are the ones that really paved this road for us. And so we'll always be grateful for them and always acknowledge that they're the ones that got us thinking the way we needed to be thinking. From there, when we took over in that database, there was approximately 119,000 algorithmic frequencies. Since then, since that time, we now have added about another 50,000 that we've learned since that time. So the AO scan today now has about 172,000 algorithms, and we're adding to that. I won't say daily, but probably every 2 or 3 weeks, we've added more algorithms to the system. And the way it works is, and it's really simple, and I think most things that are amazing are simple. You ask a question and you get an answer. In other words, if I put a frequency in, they were using transducers. With that technology today, we've got transducers the size of a quarter. And sometimes we don't even have to have that transducer necessarily to make it work. But we put a frequency in, and the brain says, oh, that's the left ventricle of the heart. And here's the vibration of the left ventricle of the heart. And that's what comes back. So we asked a question, and we got an answer. Now, we know that the left ventricle of the heart of a man, middle age, is going to be in this range, from this to this, from A to B. And if it's in that range, we know it's working the way it's supposed to be. If it's slower, then we know that something's retarding its function. It's not allowing it to do its job. If it's higher, then we know it's being stressed. And so that's how simple it is. Ask, find out what the frequency is, and then put it to the database and say, okay, is it slow, is it normal, or is it fast? So that's, in a nutshell, how simple it is. Now, it's the method of getting the question asked, answered, and evaluated is sophisticated, but the principle behind it is quite simple. Anyway, that's where the technology is, and from that, we've added so many other things to it. Now we have developed a whole system around voice that deals more with the emotion rather than with the physical. So we can capture 10 seconds of somebody's voice, and we can get really close at finding out what emotional issues are at play. We also know that when certain emotions are out of range, it can have physical effects. And so that's another way of looking, okay, well, what's causing, is there something physically wrong, or is it an emotional issue that's causing that problem? That's a big thing that I don't think Western medicine does a very good job of at this point. Because a lot of times we don't need a pill, we need a hug, or we need an emotional lift. Does that make sense? And so adding the inner voice to the technology of frequency comparison was a big thing for us. Then the next part of that was, okay, instead of just being able to send back a frequency, and I think Jennifer talks a little bit about this, is when we see a frequency that's either too slow or too high, too fast, we send back a frequency that's 180 degrees out of phase with that. So when the two hit, they cancel. And all that's like really is like pushing the reset button on your computer. It just allows it to reset and reevaluate. Now, it may go right back to the problem, or it may have been it just needed a little bit of a glitch and a push, and it was able to get back in sync. That's what the frequencies do, is when we send back those, what we call balancing or harmonizing frequencies, optimizing frequencies, it's just whatever was out is sent back 180 degrees out of phase, which allows those frequencies to kind of reassess and readjust. Now, sometimes we need more than that. Sometimes we need a pill. Sometimes we need to change a diet. Sometimes we need to change a relationship. And sometimes we can make a homeopathic. Now, is a homeopathic going to fix everything? No, and neither is a pill. Sometimes a homeopathic is just the right thing. The beauty of a homeopathic is you can't get sick. It can't hurt you. And that's not necessarily the case with a pharmaceutical pill. And I am not promoting the fact that we should throw away pharmaceuticals. That's as foolish as saying everything right now can be done with the current technology in frequency. It can't, not yet. So I think the two need to work like this. One thing I love about Eastern medicine is they don't have the egos. They don't have this, I'm smarter than you, you're not a real doctor, you're a chiropractor, you're this. They literally work hand in hand. I had my knee surgery done in China 8 or 9 years ago, whenever it was. And I saw a surgeon. I met with an acupuncturist. I met with a herbologist. I met with a Chinese medicine doctor. All of these people were in the same room, all talking to me about my condition and how they would work together. My knee surgery, I was in and out of that hospital in 3 days. Is absolutely amazing. And what was amazing to me, well, obviously 3 days was nice to be out of the hospital in 3 days, but what was really nice was to see these 4 or 5 amazing people work hand in hand together to help me get better. It wasn't about who was the smartest, or I'm the surgeon. It wasn't any of that. And that's where we need to be with medicine. I think there's a place for allopathic medicine. There's a place for naturopathic medicine. There's a place for homeopathic. There's a place for frequency. And when we get to that point, that's when Star Trek medicine will actually come into play, because that's really what the AO scan is doing right now. It's taking these disciplines from these different areas and trying to combine them. Okay, here's physically what's going on. Here's nutritionally what you need to do. Here's some points on the body that if you put a frequency or a light to, which is nothing more than a frequency, you see what I'm saying? It all is working together. And that's really what the AO scan is about. We call it AO. We've been asked, what does AO mean? I've got a big ego. My ego is, well, I think I'm the best with this. It's the alpha and the omega of scanners. It's the beginning, it's the end. There's nothing that's going to be better. Well, that's kind of silly. But the point is that's what AO stands for, because we wanted all of these things put into one convenient tool. The next part of it was, okay, what do you do with all this information? And you've played with it. You know, it's overwhelming. You get a scan. Now, Jennifer's showing you today an easy scan or a quick scan, which is only maybe 3 or 4 pages. The full vital scan is, I think, 28 pages long. Your comprehensive can be as many as 88 pages. That's a lot of information. And even though I understand this and I'm part of the team that puts this together, I scan, I optimize, and I go out the door. I don't think I spend 5 minutes looking at reports anymore. I don't care. I know if I scan, and I know if I pay attention to the foods I eat or don't eat, and I optimize, those reports aren't really that helpful for me. Now, if I'm a practitioner and I'm working with somebody that I'm not with 24 hours a day, those reports are really helpful, because I can start to see and help them understand, well, we need to make some changes here, and we need to do this. And so that was a very long-winded answer to a very short question.
That's really cool. I have a quick question. If we could backtrack just slightly, Loran, what was it about different sort of technologies around healing that intrigued the interest of you and your wife initially?
Well, that's a good question. I had no interest in medicine. In fact, today, to this day, I'm still scared to death of a needle. But we had adopted a little boy at 9 months old with cerebral palsy. And at that time, I was a magician working in Las Vegas. Totally different walk of life. But as my son started to grow, his cerebral palsy became more and more evident. By the time he hit 4 years old, we were looking at ways to help him have a better quality of life. We weren't looking to cure him. I mean, we believed everything. Cerebral palsy is not curable. We just wanted to find a way to improve his quality of life. And there wasn't anything in this country, the United States, that pointed to any of this, other than, physical therapy, and you might slow down some of these issues. And I went to back then was called a New Age fair or something. Of course, this is in the 80s, so there was no internet to speak of. And I got introduced to some pretty wild voodoo. I thought, man, this is Now, you need to understand voodoo and magic are very similar. It was intriguing to me to say, okay, you can do these things. And I was introduced to some technologies that had originated, one in Canada, in Toronto, one in Ohio, believe it or not, and one in Aberdeen, Scotland. And then some other technologies in Germany and Japan. And so my wife and I decided we're gonna go experiment and see what we can find. And we found that there were options and there were therapies and there were things that we could do to not just give him a little better quality of life, that were actually going to help mitigate some of this and maybe slow down the progress of his CP. Long story short, over a period of a few years, we developed a machine that spun, that stimulated the brain with mild current, electrocurrent, visual stimulation of the eyes, audio stimulation of the ears, a magnetic field that they laid on, and all of this was combined into what we now call the theta chamber. But that was my introduction to this. And my son was the first person we ever put in there. And my son, over the period of, so he did 21 sessions in the theta chamber. And there was some noticeable benefits, improvements. But within 6 months, he had a normal gait in his walk. He now had control over his arms. So much that the schools wanted to know what we had done. Did we change his diet? Did we do this? Did we do that? And my son now is 42, just turned 42. He's a second degree black belt, going for his third degree. He's a massage therapist, an accountant, and he has absolutely no signs of CP at all. So that is when, so this is in 1986, is when I left the entertainment industry and went into the alternative health industry. And the first 12 years of that was pretty rough. It was, people looked at this and it looked like a carnival ride. But I had my son and others that had been through this. And so that's what kind of helped us get through it. But that's how I got into the interest into looking outside the box. And there's some great things, coming down the pike, not just with us, but in this field where people are starting to look outside the box. They're starting to look for ways. They're starting to look up and listen and then act upon these downloads that we get. More and more people, and you can sense the change in the normal people. We're all normal people, you know what I mean? I'm outside the medical industry. People are sensing there's a change. There should be something more, and people are stepping up, just like the people that you've interviewed with the different technologies that they've brought to it. They are all bringing, and none of these people, I shouldn't say none, but most of them didn't start with that as their core. There was a necessity. What is it they say? The mother of invention is a necessity or something?
Yeah, the mother of all invention.
There you go. And for me, it was my son. And for each of these people that you've interviewed, there is something that changed the weather vane on their body. So the wind's blowing this way. I need to look here. And so that's the beauty of this. That's what got me going down this path, is one, the family, and then seeing how it started to travel. We ended up treating 16 children from the school that my son went to because of the change it had made in him. My son was on ABC, NBC, and CBS back when there was only 3 channels in the U.S. Anyways, no, it's amazing to me to see. But that's what got me going down this path, and then seeing, there's more. And we definitely made things that didn't work or didn't work as well, and some things have worked really well. But this is where it's headed. And Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein both said that the future of medicine is either vibration or frequency, depending on who you spoke to. And that's where we're getting to.
I love that you were a magician
in Vegas.
Before we started recording, I was just mentioning that Jason totally felt like a wizard using your tech these past few days. And of course, you would say that you used to be a magician. So you were literally looking for the magic outside of the hat or outside of the box.
Well, it also, a lot of what's been really fascinating is some of the different people we've spoken to that I think have really stepped fully into seeing outside of the box and really allowing themselves to explore. They're not starting off in medicine. That's not where it is. I actually think it's harder to get out of the box when you've been sort of programmed and conditioned in a specific way. Not that there's not benefits to all of that too, but I think you lose the magic and the creativity aspect of things and just the fun and exploration process. And the people that we've interviewed that I think are doing really amazing things, either they, I can think of someone like Dr. Todd, who is a medical doctor, but also very allowed himself to be outside the box because he's also got a lot of other pieces to that. But otherwise, they're people that haven't started off in medicine, but just were really curious and then worked with other people to help pull in the missing pieces around it. So I think that's makes total sense that you would have had that background to actually allow yourself to explore the stuff in the depth that you have. And one of the things I think is really fascinating with this type of ability to scan, when I think about things from a functional medicine perspective, in conventional medicine, we're usually healthy, and there's a line, and then you're no longer healthy. Now you're a problem. Now it's a pathology. And literally there's a line. You could look at something like a ferritin test and, it could go from like 18 to 350 and you're fine up until you're 17. And then now that's a problem, right? But the reality is in functional medicine, there's a whole zone where you're not always showing up in conventional lab testing, but stuff's going on. You've got all these different sort of issues pulling up, but it's not a pathology yet. And what I like about this type of ability to assess is giving information that's allowing us to also become more aware of what's going on and then maybe make those correlations a little bit easier. Like I checked some people and I would look at, well, this meridian seems to be out of balance, or this chakra seems to be out of balance. And then there's these other biomarkers. And this is kind of the picture that it's starting to pull together. How does that make sense for you? And it lets them become aware of their own, of the choices they're making, how they're living. And the reality is, Loran, a lot of people know the answers to their own problems if they are allowed the space to be able to become aware of it, reflect on it, and sit with it for a little bit. And then, as a practitioner, I can help guide that process and support them. But I love the piece of sort of, here's kind of what this picture's looking like. Tell me about it, and it gives you another way of interacting with the person and letting them come to it, because they will get their own aha moments as you're going through that.
That's beautiful. I feel like this is the future of practitioners.
Yeah. Well, what is it? Physician, heal thyself. We're all our own physician. And, back when I was young, doctors still came to your home. They don't do that. Well, they're starting to do that now because they can charge lots of money. They call it concierge medicine. But anyway, back then the doctor came to you and they would talk to you and they would listen to you. They would ask you questions and you would respond. And then with their education, they could say, well, based on what you're telling me, these are some of the things we ought to look at. There was real medicine being practiced back then. I love Patch Adams. I met him. Love that man. Talk about out of the box. He was not out of the box. He was out of the brain. He was amazing. He actually treated people like people. But getting back to this, I see the AO scanner as being your ability it's your mirror to look at you and say, okay, I'm having some emotional issues. I got into an argument with my spouse or my child, and I'm having these feelings. And people can start making decisions. We don't sell the AO scan software as a diagnostic device. We sell it as an educational tool so that you can take a look and say, oh, I need to change this diet. I need to change my attitude. In other words, you're becoming the physician. Now, we still need surgeons and we still need doctors and we still need these things, but so much of what we take a pill for or go to a doctor for, really, if we just talk to ourselves, listen to ourselves, a lot of that could be avoided and we'd have healthier lives. You know, I'm going to jump a little bit here. There's a practitioner in Brazil. She's a naturopath doctor, and she somehow came to know well, she had a client. I don't know how she got the client, but the client's in LA. So there's a little bit of distance there. And this lady in LA was having abdominal pains that no doctor could find. No doctor could figure out what the problem was. And so when she's on the phone doing her telemedicine thing with this naturopath in Brazil, she said, I'm going to do a scan on you. Now, this is new to her. I don't know how you're going to scan me, but she did a remote scan from Brazil over the phone with this lady in LA. And she says, you need to go see your OBGYN. There's something wrong with your left ovary. And she goes, I saw my OBGYN and everything's fine. He said, well, you need to go back. So she went back again. The OBGYN said, there's nothing wrong. I can see all your blood tests are fine. Your ultrasound is fine. Everything's fine. And so she reports that back to the naturopath. They do another scan, and she says, then you maybe need to go see another OBGYN or go back to her and demand something more because there's something seriously out of balance. And that was what she said, out of balance. She didn't say wrong, and that's what is indicating your problems. So she goes back in, and the doctor says, okay, we'll go ahead and do, I don't know if it was a CAT scan or an MRI, but something. And sure enough, there was a small tumor on the one side of the ovary that they couldn't find. They caught it in enough time that she was able to keep the ovary and didn't develop into full-blown ovarian cancer. The reason I want to say this, there's about 8,000 miles between Sao Paulo and Los Angeles, and nothing connected. She was able to tap into this lady's bioenergetic field. Nikola Tesla said that would have been done and achieved through the ether. Nobody knows what ether is, but that's what he called it. But she was able to tap in and find this thing going on with this individual. That individual was able to go to her doctor and insist that they do a little bit deeper look. Don't just look at the blood. Don't look at just this. And sure enough, there was an issue that was caught in enough time to prevent it. Now that lady now owns her own scanner and uses it on herself and her family. I just think it's wonderful. Most people that have any type of a spiritual indication believe in prayer. And they don't have any problems with saying, well, I'm going to pray for you. It doesn't matter where you're at, and fully expect you to benefit from that prayer. But if you say, well, I'm going to send you frequencies, they'll look at you and say, how many drinks did you just have? They can't fathom this. There was a study done in Russia. This is back in I want to say 70s, in an orphanage. And this is a horrible study, but the information was amazing. It was an orphanage, and they had these children. You may have seen this study. It's pretty famous. And they took half the children, and they would go in and talk to each child for 10 or 15 minutes and hold them for a few minutes. And the others, they just gave them their food, helped them with their normal stuff. The half that got the attention, just 5-10 minutes a day, excelled. Hardly any illness, no issues with, behavioral issues, where these other children got sick, lethargic, all sorts of issues. And all it was that interaction. There was another study done where they had people pray or send wishes, same type of benefit. No interaction, but these ones were prayed for or thought about, and these other ones weren't. We look at this, and that was done under a scientific umbrella, and they still don't accept it. And it's so sad to me that it's slapping us in the face. You can walk into a room full of people, and you have one of two things. You're either looking for the door to get out, or you could just sit there and spend the rest of the evening there. And the only difference is the energy in that room from the people that are there. That's it. Or listening to a piece of music that just takes you back to your first kiss, or takes you back to something that was very traumatic. These are all just energies that our body reacts to.
You know, Lauren, we interviewed Lynn McTaggart a couple of years back, and she's done a lot of work with intention, and she wrote a book called The Field and The Power of Eight and all sorts of things. And they've actually done a lot of research on that. I mean, how I was thinking about it is it's like, well, that's proven. We know that we can have an effect, this non-locality concept in quantum physics and entanglement and all of these different pieces. And you can have an intention and hold that and see a physical change, 8,000 miles away from you. We've seen that happen. So something, and you mentioned ether, and I say whether you call it ether or scalar energy or 0 point field or however you want to talk about it, but this is what I think these things are being accessed in. So it's like if we are able to literally through focus attention connect to something very physical or to somebody else and see physiological changes, to me it's like, why can't we do that in other ways rather than just sending a frequency? It's like we're also connecting to that in a non-local way and being able to access the vast amount of information that we can be privy to. So to me it's all tied into that sort of area, and I think we are just sort of making leaps and bounds on this more and more because either we're just understanding it better, and I think probably even prior to understanding it better, because I think we just are more curious and people are starting to want to know it more. So now the consciousness of the planet is shifting in a way that this is going to be something that's going to come in more and more as we move along.
Even on the flip side of that, Lauren, we have a friend who's a psychotherapist, and she said, we spoke with her just a few days ago, and she said, I don't know what's going on, but I'm noticing it with all the clients that I'm speaking with these past few weeks. I'm noticing these symptoms myself because as they talk about it, I'm noticing it within my own life and my own thinking. But she said, it's these thoughts of committing suicide and aggression and despair. But she said this has been at the forefront of all the conversations that she's been having, and that's been showing up in her life. And there are so many towers, these 5G towers that are being erected all around us that are becoming more and more visible. And this particular friend of ours is quite sensitive to the EMFs being emitted from those. But it's like, could it, I feel like, is that not a possibility that with these frequencies that are being sent out, they're actually frequencies that are inconducive, let's say, to health and well-being?
I heard it at a seminar. I can't remember who it was that said it. He said, if we could reach back and pull a healthy person from the 1500s and just reach them and put them and just have them materialize here, they die within a day because their body is not. I mean, think about in just the last 120 years, electricity, wireless information, especially in the last 10 years. And you're talking about 5G towers. They're already putting up 6 and 7G towers that nobody's even heard about. So all of this, we have evolved to where our body can deal with it. We're adapting to it. But someone that was just dropped into this from back then wouldn't have a chance. And so these fields that we're in, whether it's coming from a tower or it's coming from a device,
or even a thought form and an emotional form of people around us, and I think also like just the consciousness of the planet right now when we're going through wars and challenges and all sorts of turmoil. There's that stuff, we don't think about it, but those are different energetic frequencies.
Yes, absolutely. And they all have an effect on us. So I don't know. Right now, we joke about the tricorder from Star Trek, and that technology, I believe, is within our futures. But I think our children and our grandchildren will look back on these days and say, you were using a tablet or a phone to look at your body. And it's going to be that silly because we will have evolved to the point where we innately know and can tell how we are, because that's all we're really doing is tapping into ourselves. Right now, we need the tool. We need that crutch. And as we get more and more, you'll get to the point to where you don't even need to scan because you're going to know, yeah, this is how I normally, yeah, I need to do this. You're already seeing that the more you scan with it. For me, I love the inner voice. That's probably my go-to, the inner voice, my mind sync, and then I use the SEPI to make remedies or to send remedies. But the thing that is the hardest thing for me, I know how to avoid certain foods, and I know if I eat these foods, I can expect these issues, but I'm not always in tune to my emotions. If I'm under a lot of stress, I can respond in ways that I'm not proud of. And those feelings that not only are we spewing out to the people around us, we're also spewing them inside. And that is so damaging to us. There was a saying, people will never remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. That is internally too. And so much of our self-talk is negative. We're not nice to ourselves. So we need to get into the point where we can get up in the morning, look in the mirror, and none of us like the way we look in the mirror in the first thing in the morning, but we need to be able to stand there and say, I like you. I do. I really like you. And eventually I'm going to love you. That's the type of talk we need to be saying to ourselves, because that changes this. You can be driving down the street and somebody rear ends you. I guarantee your emotions just took a dip. We have to use, so my inner voice, I'll use my inner voice sometimes 3-4 times a day just to get back into the balance where I need to be. The energies that we put out, that's easy to talk about, but it's the energies that we're putting back into us that we really need to focus on. And that's why I think this type of technology, whether it's AOScan or an NES or Zyto or any of the others out there, because they all have benefits. This is where we need to start. These are our training wheels for the next probably 10 or 15 years.
Mm-hmm. I can hear this question from audience listening in. What is the accuracy rate of the results of your device, Loran?
Well, and does it correlate at all with when we would do conventional types of testing too? Like if we looked at blood tests or something, is there a correlation that you can make with that compared to the scan?
Okay, so the only thing that we can really correlate as an accuracy, and I'm going to give you back. Okay, so let's go back to the pioneer days when we sold things, we bartered. We'd sell a gallon of milk and we'd get a pound of butter or something, and they would use a scale. Well, the scale was set to say if my pound of butter was really only 3/4 of a pound. Didn't know that. I'm selling you 3/4 of a pound of butter for a full gallon of milk that I can actually see is a full gallon. Same thing. How accurate are the blood tests and the CTs and the MRIs that we're comparing to? So with that in mind, we won't put anything in the vitals or the comprehensive that doesn't have an 85% or higher correlation with a known blood test or a known CT or a known MRI. So that's the only things that we can really quantify. And we're quantifying against something that we know isn't perfect. So yeah, we can see those correlations. We've had things in the scanner that over a period of time, it wasn't consistently 85% or higher, and we've pulled them out. There's things that we're adding. In fact, just last year, we added over 200 things to the vitals that had over a period of 8 months showed that consistency. And so that's always going to be changing. Like Jennifer pointed out a little bit too, and so did you. Our blood tests are a moment in time. You can take a blood test and 10 minutes later take another blood test and see a change because things have changed. So my personal view is that the vitals are actually more accurate than a blood test. I would never put that in writing, but only because it's that moment in time. And it's, that's what it is. And I know that if I do a vitals now and I do a vitals in 20 minutes or an hour from now, there will be a change. Even though I may not have eaten anything, I may not have gone anywhere, I may be still sitting right here at this desk. My emotions have changed. My thought process has changed. The day of my body organs are switching from sleeping to working mode. Everything changes, and our blood is always changing. We did in fact, I have to send this to you. We have reports of, we did 11 cases of an MRI, known condition, and a scan. And the comprehensive view of that issue, whether it was a brain or a spine or a bone or whatever, was dead on, 100% the same. So we know that this is picking up those frequency anomalies and able to put it on a report.
I know as a practitioner, can you speak a little bit on that? Because you regularly deal with blood work and how I know you've had a lot of frustration even around lab tests these past few years specifically.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Lauren, I mean, conventional testing is not 100%. A lot of people like to think it is, but it's not. And many times I've had tests where I'm running different panels, and sometimes there might be an overlap on a certain test. I'll give you one example. Just a little while ago, I was checking methylation markers and in a test for that, and I was looking at homocysteine was one of the markers in two different things. And, the range is say between 5 and 15 or something, and one of the tests came back at 3.5 and the other one came back at 12. And I'm like, that's a pretty ridiculous difference between those. Now, the only way you really know is by reproducing, doing them over time and starting to see where you start to see the baseline in. And then you start to get really accurate information. But any one test, for us, I'm always using it based on symptoms and the whole intake. So I understand what's going on. And then I can use that and I can use the labs to help me fine tune. But I don't let the labs trump what the symptoms actually are. The symptoms are actually more important than what the labs can be used to help fine tune. But, in the same way I would use the scanner, I would do repetitive scans and see what's coming up and see how things are changing. But
which is interesting because your intake is 1 hour. You speak for 1 hour with a client, whereas for most of the conventional practitioners and doctors out there, because their time with patient is so short, they rely more heavily on that blood work, which, as you
that's
say,
probably
can be
true
pretty
too. I think
inaccurate.
if a practitioner is spending more time, then they want to get to know the person. They will take more time listening to all of the symptoms. Otherwise, it is true. It kind of comes down a lot more to, a couple of really big symptoms and then blood work to support it.
I was in Russia 2018, I think, and went to one of their hospitals, and they had, just like our hospitals, they had an imaging area where they had CTs and MRIs, X-ray machines, ultrasounds, and NLS systems, which is our system. It was in the hospital, in the imaging lab, and they use that as their go-to. They only go to these others if something came up here that I needed to maybe take another look. And to me, that was just fascinating. That'll never happen here in the States, but I saw it over there, and it was just, this is where we need to be.
Isn't that so funny though, Lauren? It's like that's, it's like a lot of times we think that the medical system in North America is like, super advanced. And it's not that it isn't in certain ways, but it's like,
Isn't it that they're the sickest nation in the world?
The sickest nation, the most obese nation. We
Yeah.
are. It's horrible. It's horrible. We may have the most advanced technology, but we are third world in the way that we deliver medicine.
And then you go and look at some of the stuff that's just because they're open to using it. For whatever reason, they don't have the same limitations on actually allowing that type of information in, and then knowing how to use it appropriately, in a hospital and in practitioners using it. Like
Influence of industry.
Yeah. I think it's wild, but it also just for people to understand, it's like, it's not, when just because it's outside of what is conventional doesn't mean it's woo-woo just because you don't know about it. A lot of times what's woo-woo is cutting edge technology in other places of the world.
Well, alternative medicine is only alternative until it's accepted. Chemotherapy started out as an alternative medicine, and now it's everywhere. So it's interesting. We need to start looking outside the box, get rid of our biases, and just have an open mind. We need to look at every option. Why do you think people leave the United States and go to Mexico and Philippines and India? It's not necessarily that they have better medicine. They have hope. That's one thing we don't do well here in the US with our medicine is give people hope or options. And heaven forbid a doctor talks to you about changing your diet. It's amazing how we've become so robotic and inhuman in the thing that we should be the most animated and most humanity in is in people's health. And it's just become it's a machine that makes money, and that's unfortunately where our industry is for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Lauren, I think what we'll do now is we'll bring Jennifer, who's one of the instructors for the AO scan, on to actually run through what a scan looks like. So if you are listening to this on the audio, you might want to check out the video on our YouTube platform. Check that out, and you'll be able to see the outline of what a scan looks like, at least one of the scans that she'll break down for us. All right, so now we thought we'd segue over to Jennifer, who's been one of the instructors for Solex and has been working with the AO scan technology for several years. And I thought it would be really fun for her to actually bring up what a scan looks like, or at least part of a scan, because we can't do all of it because there's so much information. But I'm going to pass this over to Jennifer to run us through what a scan looks like and how to interpret it, and we'll go from there. So Jen, thanks for coming on here, and I'll pass this over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. So I'm going to go ahead and share here what a report. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Slide? Okay. So there's many components when I'm looking at a scan as far as where do I even begin? Where do I start with my client? And the truth is we're going to talk specifically about the easy scan here in a minute. But the AO MindSync has probably been one of the most supportive as far as the aspects of before I start a scan of where I start and how I start. And that's just because I do believe that if you can hear yourself speak affirmations right at the very beginning, it can release things that no longer serve you, and it can allow for you to take in all that your body may need. So the bottom one, that AO sync there's multiple different affirmations that can be used, and there's no right or wrong. There's no ones that have to be used or not. But then the second one I use, the quick scan, is used in mainly for me if I'm looking at if the individual is utilizing this type of technology on a day-to-day basis. I'm looking at the quick scan for really supplemental use. Is there supplements in their day-to-day that they may want to be taking, or that their body, the energy of their body is asking for? That's where quick scan will come in. But I oftentimes am using the easy scan because it's looking at the voice, it's looking at the vitals and the comprehensive all together. So I don't know if I can pull this up here. This is a report here. So when we're looking at the very first section, it's going to pull up the inner voice first. Now it's really automated. I mean, Loran has created this technology so smartly that you don't have to do a whole lot of adjusting and transferring of like wondering what it's supposed to be doing. It will do what it is designed to do. So I oftentimes, when I speak into it, I say, my name is Jennifer Nelson, Jennifer Hawks. And then I just speak whatever I need to speak for 10 seconds. It's going to record the octaves of my voice. And wherever there is an imbalance or potential disruption, it's going to project back tones for me to listen to. So I actually listen to those tones as I'm looking at the report. So there's a 5-minute, 10-minute, or continuous, and that pulse cycle is right below. So I go ahead and just push the pulse cycle, and it'll start playing tones back in real time based on the voice scan. If you want to get into the light wave, the optical glasses are powerful as far as looking at the type of wavelengths you need for colors to support the emotional aspects of the inner voice that's coming in. Down below, you've got the quick scan audio, which can be played. For this instance, I probably did a quick scan prior to the report that I'm looking at. And then down below, I look at the supplements. Now, these ones are pre-programmed from the homeopathic, the energy homeopathics. So it'll give me 6 different homeopathics that I can actually imprint in real time to support my system at that given time. So whether you're doing it, for me, I specifically will imprint it into a glass of water and consume it right away. Or if it's for a client, sometimes I will just create an imprint for them right then and there if I need to. Moving down, it's important to understand the color coding, because the color coding tells so much. So the 1, 2, and 3s are going to show diminished function potential that's going on in the body. Now, that could be something like if you're looking at food, it depends whether it is something that you've eaten that's creating a weakness, or perhaps I've seen where maybe garlic has come up, where the body's actually asking for it because there's a diminished function in the body somewhere else that it needs that antimicrobial. So it's really about when you're looking at the food sensitivity list, and what I've seen in my clinic, in my practice, is don't take it so literally. If it shows up, it doesn't mean that you can't have it. It means you might need to do some further testing or some further investigation as to why that might be coming up. But remember, it's a snapshot in time. So it's also something that you might have consumed within a couple of hours, or, perhaps there's an inflammatory response too. And that's where we're going to get over to the increased inflammation risk. And that's that 7, 8, and 9. So just like a swinging pendulum happens, you've got the 5, which is right in the middle. That's that green. It's considered in the homeostasis section. So things are going to swing back and forth. And because we are vibrational beings, we're never stationary. We have variations of frequencies that are happening in any given time and moment in space. So when you see something that is out of range and it's coming closer to in range. So for instance, on this first one, dairy, the casein, I'm looking at a previous scan, which is going to be on your right side, and then a post scan, which is on the left side, or the current scan. So 1 went to a 2. It's moving in the right direction. So the food sensitivity, I don't pay so much attention to unless I know that there's a lot of inflammatory responses. Then I'm going to go look at the gut health on the report. Now, for this specific report, it's only bringing up the things that are out of balance. Otherwise, you can do a vital scan and it's going to show everything, whether it's in balance or out of balance. So the reason why I like this is because I'm really only focusing on those that are out of balance and what I need to look at to support the person or myself to bring that into that space. So the first section there is going to be blood. It's just really looking, I see right here, white blood cells. You just have to kind of know what's going on in the body. So if you're not really, if you don't understand anatomy, or you don't understand some of the functionalities that are going on internally as far as blood work goes, sometimes you won't be able to connect these dots. But if you know white blood cells, I want to think about immunity as I'm looking down through the test or the report. The first next section is going to be the chakras. So those little electrical boxes that are going up through the body. So here the root chakra is out of balance twice. So I want to make sure that there is, there's a potential for just being ungrounded in this given particular moment. So if I do a Cephi, which we'll talk about later, I would look at creating a playlist for this individual or this specific report to create some grounding in that root chakra. So that's the beautiful thing, is you can allow the system to send back these frequencies in real time. Then we get down to the meridians. Again, on the meridians, I'm just really looking at the current. So the lungs, large intestine, stomach, spleen, those are all current. They're all in the green zone. I'm looking for things that are not. So here I see the kidney. Kidney went from a 4 to a 2. Now going backwards in time, so from a 4, it looks like it's getting into that diminished function. because perhaps when you run the optimization, it's going to tend to, as it's optimizing some things are going to fall back out of balance. So again, that's just part of the whole vibrational patterns of the body. But kidney here, the pericardium, the liver, the governing vessel. Now the pericardium, well, really more of the governing vessel, but I think of that as the grounding, right? So back up to the root chakra, those two are kind of coinciding together, saying, oh, there could be some, things that are not, the body's not grounded the way it needs to be. Kidney and liver, I want to think about drainage. What's the body doing as far as the draining aspect of that goes? As we move down here, you've got all of the physical and the physiological relationships with all of the meridians. So if you don't know what each meridian are, they're there for you. You can look at those. And then it allows you to also look to see if perhaps you do, I call them breakout scans, which are part of another system that we can go through. Then you get down to the amino acids, the microminerals, and all the other categories. Some of the things that I want to look at, because as I've seen going down, I don't try to necessarily try to find a reason for each and every line item. I'm really looking at the big picture here. So as I look down and I see copper and I see thymus there, the anti-thyroglobulin antibody, so thyroid function. Really, I'm going to stop at that immune system, because I know my the white blood count showed up earlier, and I see the thymus. I know the system is not grounded because I see that in the meridian section. So the potential for this type of scan to be showing, immune system imbalancing, which is just throwing some other things off, the liver, the kidneys, I would say with this scan particularly, I'd be looking at the immune system and asking the individual, how do you feel? Are you overtired? You'll notice when you look down at the toxicities, there's not a ton in each one. There's 3 in the molds. There's a couple in the viruses. There's 1 parasite. But unless I see like parasites where there's like 5 or 6 that show up and everything else is super low, then I might look at parasites in general. But it's also patterns that I'm looking at. So it's not just necessarily this one-time shot. I want to rescan I want to rescan the next day or even later that evening, just to see what those patterns are starting to show and look like. Is this making sense so far?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any questions thus far?
Yeah, I think it's all really fascinating. I know even when I was going through it, what I thought was really interesting is I would check. And I think the thing for people to understand too is, like, when we talk about the realm of subtle energies and we're looking at all these different layers, it's like we are constantly all day long in a state of fluctuation, like, and depending on what we're being exposed to. So literally I would test myself fasted, and then I'd eat certain things and I would recheck again after that, and I would see certain things coming up, and I would see sometimes patterns with certain foods that that were creating a bit more of an inflammatory response that I had just had, and I could see that showing up there, and I might even see that changing in some of the blood chemistry around like cholesterol or HDL or something along those lines, or CRP, like inflammation markers. So it was really neat to see the correlations between these different things. I even think, like, you could check yourself and then you could go in an area that's a higher area of EMF or something, and you're going to find that's going to create a whole lot of dysfunction in things. So definitely being able to see the big picture and start to try to narrow down how to interpret the information, I think is really important. Otherwise, it can seem like just kind of overwhelming and you don't know where to start. But being able to kind of tie the picture together is really the art of it, I think.
Yeah, and I agree with that entirely. And I also think, the patterns and, it's information. I try to explain it also as it's your body's way of being able to communicate with you, right? Because it's like when you don't understand another language, but someone's trying to communicate with you, and you know that there's intent behind it and they have a reason for trying to get that information to you, but you just don't understand it. It's kind of like that when it comes to like, why do I have a headache right now? Why do I feel, run down right now? Why does my stomach hurt right now? Why am I inflamed? Well, this is a great way for that communication pattern to be available. It's your body's way of communicating, right? So it still isn't another language, but yet you have the ability to interpret what it's saying.
Jennifer, is the goal ever to have nothing on the left side?
No, you don't want that. We are vibrational beings. We need flexion. We need variables.
Yeah.
That's how that if we have nothing, we're not surviving. We're not even living. We're dead, right? Because that's a flat line. So you've got to have that bounce all day long. And we are such innate beings that when you find where the pendulum is swinging too far to the right or too far to the left, the body will, if given the right energy or whatever that is, maybe it's a superfood, or maybe it's a hug from your child, or whatever that is, whatever vibration that the body is needing to create that homeostasis will happen. And this type of tool, this type of technology is beautiful because it can do it without even thinking about it. It sends you the opposite. So when you scan and then you optimize, it's sending you the opposite of where it showed up as being out of balance to create that homeostasis pattern for you to be as optimal as possible in that given moment.
It reminds me a lot of even Dr. Emoto's work, where he would do making up the different hados, and he would have, if you were in a certain mental emotional state, and if you picture it like a frequency, like a waveform, it goes in a certain direction in a certain cadence, and then he would give the opposite emotion to that would kind of have a nullifying effect on it. It would kind of neutralize it. And that's what I find with a lot of this. When we think about things from a standpoint of wavelength and frequency, it simplifies health in a lot of ways, because you kind of bring in the beneficial frequency and integrate that into the body, and it will create resonance, and it will sort of bring things back into an optimal balance.
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's it. And that's exactly what this type of technology is all about.
Yeah,
is creating that vibrational.
It makes me
balance.
think it's helping us to stir the ship a little bit easier.
Absolutely.
Jennifer, what's really interesting to me is that what we learned is that the app is not only educational, because it kind of breaks down each piece as we scroll through each section, but also there's it shows the connection and the interrelationship of all the parts of the body. So you're not only looking at what would possibly show up in a blood work, right? But also how that interplays within symptoms that might be coming up, or the energetic body as well, which was really neat. And lastly, there's also the frequency remedy, which I feel like a lot of people might have a hard time to even wrap their head around. Can you explain a little bit more about how that works exactly?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's no system in our body that works alone. It works, it has to work all together, or it doesn't work at all, right? So when you're thinking about vibration or the imprinting, so the Cephi, for instance, the easiest thing for me to try to explain it is it's just like it's kind of similar to like what a homeopathic remedy would be, because a homeopathic remedy is a vibrational remedy. It is a remedy that you take that supports the software system of your body. Because if you think about our body as like a computer system, we have our hardware system and we have our software system. So these type of remedies are really going in and supporting our software system wherever there has been a little bit of a viral load, or a little bacterial load, or a little bit of, energy influencing from EMFs or people, right? So these patterns, these vibrations that you can continuously run, you can imprint into a medium, or you can get them quantumly, you can get them physically, when I say physically, I mean imprinting them into like a semi-precious stone or into sugar pellets or a glass of, distilled water, whatever that is. And then you're giving your body that information. But the beautiful thing is you can either give it to if you create an imprint into a semi-precious stone, you can have it on your body all day long, and your innate vibrational being will take that information as it needs it. So it's not like having to take a prescription medicine every day. Our innate beings will take whatever vibration pattern it needs to create that energy state, that homeostasis at that time.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Prior to finding this information on the AO scan, I had frequency generating machines that I would use to make our own remedies and different things along those lines. But I tell you, this is so much easier to be able to pull it together and utilize it. And now we're even experimenting with really high quality structured water versus regular kind of water to be able to embed the frequencies in. And I think that's even like another level of being able to have access to the information that's going to be held from the frequencies.
Yeah, and we've come into a state that we didn't have as much radiation or cell phones 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever. We are subjected to so many environmental influences now that having this type of technology in real time is really creating longevity. It's creating a purpose within our bodies.
It also gets a little bit addictive because I know since I've been playing with it, myself and my kids, we've been both really having fun with checking it. And I like to see too, because I feel like if there is certain things that are really, even in the realm of energetics that actually are very physical, you'll start to see those showing up consistently too, I often find. So if there's certain things that, have gone from the more energetic down into the physical now, I will usually see that those things are more consistent. They're showing up more regularly.
Yeah, and I have I work with a gentleman that he's created a software system, because if I had to go in and do these patterns every day, it can be very time consuming. But if I'm really trying to dial in on what is going on with an individual, I'll have them scan every day at the same time, doing the same routine, and do it for 15 days in a row. And then he takes those scans and he puts them into his system and provides a spreadsheet for me. And it is incredible. It can pinpoint immediately what's going on and what system you need to look at.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, that would be a great way to be able to condense the information down. I'll have to talk to you about that after.
Yeah.
Okay, super. Anything else there, Jennifer, that you wanted to run us through?
I mean, on this scan, this one, there is down below, there is the comprehensive information, which is really dialing into more of the organs. This I really just use for more of my more information. So we saw thyroid come up. Now I'm seeing the thyroid cartilage, left ovary, nothing really populated that I can pinpoint quickly on the report previous. So, reproductive might be coming up. The bursa, the shoulder. I really just take this last, for me specifically, I don't pay much attention to the comprehensive unless I have something super physical going on that I want to see if it's populating. Oftentimes I'll see like digestive stuff going on here. But otherwise, that's kind of how I'm looking at the easy scan. And I just like that big picture of kind of all three scans in one.
I think it's really cool. And how I was playing with I really liked the information, that the detailed anatomy, I mean, right to pinpointing.
Oh.
And then how it helped me too was I would look at it and I would see how that fascial chain is connected up and how that fascial chain is connected to the meridian, and be able to kind of then bring it back to some of the other information. So it's like when you can start to integrate it really helps you see all the different pieces in it that might be playing into why someone's dealing with any degree of illness or ill health, and you can kind of track it all through. It's a really, really fun way to play with it.
Well, and the beautiful thing is, for individuals that are just using it for their their day to day, and they really don't have the practitioner knowledge behind, you can just scan and let it optimize. You don't have to play into the knowledge that's there, but you can also, for those that are a little bit more in, depth with anatomy, physiology, and being able to connect those dots, it can become a super tool for that.
Yeah, it's definitely a super versatile tool for practitioners and for the layperson to be able to have something that just, like I said again, helps them kind of steer the ship. So that was a great overview, Jennifer. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
Jennifer, is there anything else you'd want to relay to the audience who's tuning in today that you think might be important?
I think the only other really important piece of this is really just understanding how powerful the Cephi is. The Cephi, I think, is probably it's the number one tool that I go to. You can create playlists, you can grab Bach flowers, you can get homeo energetics. I'm sure there's more things up Loran's sleeve for other things coming down the pipeline. But it's really a way to be able to create these energetic support, whether you're doing it quantumly for someone else that you're working with afar, whether you're doing it with yourself in current time. That is the piece I really love the most.
That was my 7-year-old's favorite part too. So she always wanted to see which Bach flower remedy. And it was actually really fascinating because I would check, like, 6 and 7-year-olds, they'd have an argument, there'd be a meltdown. My one wasn't feeling heard and all this kind of stuff. And then we check, and that was actually the remedy that would come up for her. I was really astounded for myself too at different times. And then we'd actually connect it to the quantum energy wellness bed and have them lie down on the bed and then run the frequency through and just kind of let them sort of be immersed in it for a period of time. So it was really, really fun way to interact with even our kids.
I love that. I mean, truly, that is exactly the type. And then also, I mean, I also love using it on the animals. So, I mean, and that's a whole other podcast, but, taking out the ego that we all, carry, even though we don't necessarily want to carry that sometimes, those animals just don't carry that. And you can see patterns shift so quickly in an animal and even a plant. So that's fun. Doing little exercises with plants is fun too.
That'll be another episode.
And that's actually really fun experiments to do with kids too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's also great for showing our younger generation how important frequency really is, right? I mean, because we can't see it and we can't hear it and we can't smell it, but we can feel it. And so for them to be able to have a technology or a tool where they can start to see and integrate those, adding in the 5 senses around the fact that you can start, you can feel it, but then figuring out how it all kind of patterns it together, I think is important.
Really cool. I wanted to mention this quickly. I know you have to run off soon, but this past summer, our girls and we were planting seeds within an egg carton before we would transplant it outside. But just for fun, the littlest one decided that she wanted to put an amethyst crystal on one of the egg cartons. And and they were all the same seeds that we had planted on these 2 particular egg cartons that were sitting side by side on the counter. And within a week, she came back and said, "Oh, Mommy, look, this one is sprouting, but this one isn't." And it was the one with the crystal.
But the whole carton, it was significant. Yeah. It was really cool. And I mean, kids are in tune with this so much better than most adults because it just hasn't been conditioned out of them. And they know, I mean, they get a feeling and they act to it. I think especially if they spend more and more time with nature and they're sort of grounded in that way. But I think this type of medicine...
Less impeded by the adults.
It's true. But I think this type of frequency-based medicine is really great for kids too, because like you said, they don't have as many blocks in there. They're more open to it. And just like pets and animals and stuff, there's less getting in the way. So it just goes in and it starts to make corrections, and you're constantly able to make these corrections on this outer level in hopes that you just don't get these things that linger longer and longer and become more dense and solidified.
Yeah, that biofield becomes so much stronger. and more
Yeah.
resilient.
Wonderful. Jennifer, thanks so much
Thank you.
for sharing all of that.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
What I wanted you to understand is Jennifer is one of our instructors. She's got courses in Solex University, but we had her go down and do the training in Ecuador just a couple of weeks ago in November. And there she was there for 2 days teaching them how to utilize and understand the AO scanner. What's important to understand is in Ecuador, the majority of the people with the AO scanner in Ecuador are practitioners, not so much the lay people. She had oncologists there, ophthalmologists, cardiologists, other doctors, and as well as naturopaths. And she had people there from Brazil, Spain, Peru, Mexico. This was a group of about 87 doctors there, Jennifer.
Yeah,
And,
there was quite a few.
and the thing is these doctors are using this technology in their practice. In fact, the oncologists are using them in the hospital in Quitos. So she's absolutely amazing, and I was really grateful that she was able to hop on with us today. So thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, Jennifer.
I do have to
Bye,
run.
Jen.
We'll
Thank
see
you. It's
again
been fun.
soon.
About 10 years ago, we did an experiment with a small community farm. When I say a small, it's probably 2 acres farm. So that's not real small. And it was divided into 4 sections. And they allowed us to go in and take just one section, and they were all doing corn. It was all corn. And we took 2 copper rods and we put them in the opposite corners of this one quadrant, and we ran it to the CEPI, and we ran these frequencies in. At the end, and we ran for 2 hours, I think, a day for the duration. At the end, the corn that had the CEPI frequencies going in was between 24 and 32 inches higher than any of the others, and at least 50% less of any of the bugs, or corn can sometimes get bacteria and stuff in it. And the funniest thing and the saddest thing is, you would have thought that would have been, never wanted to do it with the rest of the farm. Makes no sense to me. No sense. And costs nothing to do. No fertilizer, no extra water, no different sunshine. You would have thought they would have been putting that in every farm. No interest.
That's cool. We're going to be trying that in our garden.
Yeah. Well, and you know what's fascinating, Loran, is we've been fortunate to have conversations with, I think, some real fascinating people that are doing some really amazing work. And I think also ahead of the time that people are not quite ready for it sometimes. And, when we talked to, Ralph Sudeth, who we've interviewed several times now, founder of Quantum MedTech. I mean, he's done some brilliant work with water and agriculture. And he had a whole group for a period of time. He did actually a big presentation to a bunch of big food networks. These were guys like Dole and, all of these big companies. And he was showing that using the specific structured water that he was doing and sea salts, that was it. Structured water and sea salts. And he found that combination was increasing agricultural yield by about 35%. And you didn't have to use any pesticides, anything. They actually wanted nothing to do with it, because it actually, they're all work together with big industry, with chemical companies too. So, it's almost like I think it keeps going until eventually the bigger populations start to just want something different, and then it starts to shift. But to me, I'm not surprised with that, because you're creating a field, and there's a beneficial field that is going to be optimal for cell growth, for decreasing bugs, all these types of things, because bugs also don't want to go where there's healthy plants, right?
That's right.
So it all makes sense to me. Everything comes down to fields, and you're creating fields around your body or around the garden or wherever you're going to be. And how do we build more resilience against some of the fields that aren't so beneficial around us?
Well, it's like what Ralph was saying. He said, bugs are not the bad guys. Bugs actually, it's the plants that actually call on the bugs to help them break down and start over again. So it's not the bugs that are the bad guys, but it's like, how do we actually create a field within which health can thrive, which is essentially what
Right.
we're doing.
Right. Yeah, Nikola Tesla had done some experience with farm, but he had his wires going across over the crop instead of in the ground. And as a kid, we lived in Idaho, and in the summer months, we had a lot of tourists driving through to go fishing at the lake that we were nearby. And so I went and got an extension cord, plugged into the normal wall, and got big nails, the 12-inch nails, wrapped the cable around them, and I would stick them in the ground in my lawn about 10 feet apart, hose it down real well, turn it on, don't walk on it, wait for about an hour, turn it off, unplug the cable. I'd have a slew of earthworms, and I'd go grab all those earthworms, and I was out on the street at 11 years old selling boxes of earthworms, but they couldn't handle the frequency, the energy in the ground, so they'd come up.
Wow,
So anyway,
that's cool.
that's why I did the spikes in the ground for the crops, and maybe putting the frequency in that way. Anyway, it's just fun stuff.
That's really cool.
So you've been doing this for a long time.
I love it. That's totally ingenuity, though. That's real ingenuity. I love it. Loran, one thing I wanted to ask you about too, when we were talking in private, I was asking about Rife technology. And I think this is an interesting one for viewers because lots of different companies are created different machines that are, piggybacking off of the work that Rife used. And from my limited understanding with it is certain things are not actually all in alignment with how Rife actually used the technology. I'm wondering if you can share what we talked about as far as what needs to be in place from your experience to make Rife technology actually work, and maybe share just a little bit about Royal Rife and the work that he did.
Okay, so I'm no expert on Dr. Rife. I know enough to make me dangerous, but what I do know is that when he started, he actually acquired an X-ray machine. He took the X-ray tube out and he replaced it with a vacuum tube that had 5 noble gases in it, and he modified that to fit into the X-ray machine. And then on the front side of the X-ray machine, he had basically a 500 watt radio station box. He could actually tune in a frequency, and he would run that audio frequency into the X-ray machine through his modifications that would then ignite the plasma tube, which would put out this audio frequency run through plasma. Okay, so a real Rife machine, as I understand it, has to have those 3 things: a plasma tube, a generator that can fire, ignite the gas in the plasma tube, and a frequency generator that can put frequencies into the tube at the amplitude that it needs. Now, a real plasma tube with that kind of power going through to it, you cannot touch it. If you touched it, your skin would stay on the tube. There would be an RF burn, a radio frequency burn. So anything that you can touch, in my opinion, is not a true Rife delivery system. Now, I'm not saying you can't run Rife frequencies through tactile things and probes, but that actually becomes, in my opinion, more of an EMS or a TENS type of a delivery rather than a real Rife delivery system. The other thing that Rife did, now Rife only had 15 frequencies. He didn't have 2,000 or 10,000 or whatever it was that's out there. He had 15. And they started around 300 megahertz or 300,000 hertz and went up to 1.6 kilohertz or 1.6 million hertz. Those were the frequencies that he could see under his microscope that would obliterate an unhealthy cell, not lower than that. Okay. In fact, the lowest frequencies that he had any benefit one was in the 300 megahertz range. What's interesting is there's a professor, I think one of the Minnesota universities, that actually did a TED Talk where he duplicated this, and he actually duplicated it in real time. And this, you can find it on YouTube, where he actually duplicated what Rife did, and you could actually see an unhealthy cell split open. So I think that's fascinating, because now we don't have to go back 100 years to see what Rife did. But the other thing that Rife did, which is critical, is that when he put it out of frequency, it had 11 sidebands down frequencies and 11 sidebands up, or octaves. So his theory was a parasite could adapt or evolve to a frequency and survive. Just like if you take too many antibiotics, the antibiotics they don't work anymore because you create superbugs. And he found that if he had the 11 octaves down, 11 octaves up, that would take care of any of that mutation or evolving to where it protected them to survive, and they wouldn't survive. So when he put a frequency in, there would be the main carrier frequency, 11 octaves down frequencies and 11 more octave up frequencies to kill whatever he was trying to get rid of. That's why I think it was 33 out of 38 people he had complete remission in. It was 100% success. And the Rife machines that are out in the market now, I don't think can come even close to that type of claim. So what we developed a machine, and there are, in all fairness, there are a few other companies out there that have done the same thing. One in Canada, I think they call it the Pearl. And there's a couple others here in the States, I can't remember their names, that will do those 11 octaves up and down. We felt that it had to have the power to where if you touch the tube that you would burn. So ours is probably the most powerful out there. But when you rotate through those, now the other thing that I found was it only took 150 seconds of a frequency being exposed to a cell for the cell to be obliterated. So what our machine does is it plays each one of those frequencies for 3 minutes, 180 seconds, and an additional 30 seconds more. And then it will rotate to the next frequency and to the next and the next. And that in a 45-minute period of time, you've been exposed to every single one of Rife's original frequencies with their 11 octaves up and 11 octaves down. And so that's how our Rife system works. And I can tell you that if you sat in our room where our tube is on, the minute I turn on the tube, you will immediately feel something in your body. And I mean, that's pretty amazing, because most devices, you see the tube, you don't really feel anything. Here, you will definitely feel. And the funny thing is, or the interesting thing is, you'll feel it where there's something not right in your body. Like this morning, we were doing some treatments with some clients. 4 people in the room, turned on the system. They're all getting the exact same frequency. One feels it in the throat, one feels it in her heart, one felt it in her gut, and one felt it in his head. Every single one of them had a different issue, but every one of them had a different response. So that's the main core. But then we've added 4 more tubes. So we have one in the center of the room that has an effective range of about 30 feet in any direction. Then we have 2 tubes that are on verticals that are playing the lower frequencies. So based on those original 15 Rife frequencies, we went down to their lowest octave, which is around between 800 and 2000 hertz. So they're way down. And we play those frequencies, 2 tubes. So we'll pick one frequency, play both tubes will be playing the same frequency, but one tube will be 180 degrees out of phase. So when that standing wave hits, they create 0 point, they cancel. And then we have another set of tubes playing another set of frequencies, but 180 degrees out of phase, doing the same. So when you sit in this room, you are literally sitting with the main high intensity original Rife frequencies emanating from the center. And then you've got your 2 0 points happening. As you're walking to that room, you can start to feel probably 10 feet away from before you get to the room, you can actually feel an energy shift in the room. And it's not like, I feel something happen. No, it is, I'm walking into a wall, and it's getting denser as I go. But it's the funny thing is, it's not a a feeling that says, oh, I want to go the other way. It's one that says, I really like this. And then the last thing that we've done to that is we've developed these chairs that you sit underneath this head unit, and we create 900,000 negative ions per second, and they're just literally raining down on you. When you sit down in your chair and you turn on the on button, you will immediately jolt like this. You'll feel like something just came over your head. You'll look up, you'll feel if there's any wind, because it feels like there's air. There's no wind, and you sit there for 45 minutes. And so it's a pretty intense experience. But we're having people get out and say, my sore throat's gone, or my headache's gone, or my knee joint issue is better. It's the whole thing, but the whole room is zero point energy.
In the conversation that we were having earlier with you, you were saying, it's kind of the time where these ideas are being downloaded, and those who are ready and say yes are executing those ideas that are coming forth. But essentially, this time and this period and humanity is needing these technologies. And like you said, I feel like it is kind of this bridge that will take us to a place where eventually we'll be able to tap into our own innate biological abilities. But for now, we're almost needing a bit of a guidance or assistance to get us there.
Let me tell you one thing too. This is a passion for me. I've never patented, nor will I patent any of the technology that we build here. I believe it was given to me freely, and it's probably being given to multiple people. And if someone can build a better one, then I'll buy theirs. What we're here for is to help each other have the best experience that we can have in this life and move on in our journey to whatever comes next. And so I'm not saying that there aren't things that should be patented, but when it comes to people's health, I don't think that's one of them.
Loran, I want to thank you so much for your time with us today. Where can people learn more of the work that you guys are doing? What's the best place to send them, and they can check everything out?
So not only the equipment that you're speaking of, but also the app that you're making
scan
available for people as well.
Well, solexllc.com is the scanner. And then Energy Dev is the other company of ours that manufactures the bigger equipment. And energy is spelled with an I, so it's INNERGYDEV.com. And as I've said to you before, we market the AO scan as an affiliate/network platform. And I know some people will have an aversion to that, and I'm sorry, we've now got it into the hands of thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and at least 500 to 1,000 new people every month. And that's what we need to do, is get it into the hands of people. And so if people just want to have it, like you're a practitioner, you want to have a device, buy a device, you just pay your monthly subscription. There's no push. But we went from selling 670 units in 4 years to close to 20,000 units in 3. And that means that 20,000 people are getting the benefit, not 600. And so we just want to make it available to people the way we can. So, and then they can always reach out to you, I guess.
Super. We'll have those links in the show notes too, so people can check that stuff out. And yeah, we're going to have to do this again at some point, Loran. Real pleasure and real fun to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. See you.